This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and this episode is brought to you by Silna Health. That's S-I-L-N-A, the premium front-end RCM company that leverages technology with a team of onshore insurance experts to handle benefit checks, eligibility checks, and prior authorizations. Finally, a vendor that you can trust, like a full-time employee that scales with your business. Just mention the Profiles in Leadership podcast to receive a free trial. Today, our guest is Colin Carr, who is a commercial real estate expert who has successfully completed over 1,000 commercial real estate transactions while saving his clients hundreds of millions of dollars. Colin founded and scaled Carr, a nationwide commercial real estate company, to exclusively represent the unique needs and interests of healthcare providers. He has mastered several niches in the healthcare real estate industry and is passionate about helping others maximize your profitability through real estate. Today, Carr is the nation's leading healthcare real estate advisor with a team of almost 150 experts that span coast to coast. Every year, thousands of healthcare providers trust Carr to help them achieve the most favorable terms on their leases and purchase negotiations. So, Colin, welcome to the program. Great to have you on today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So, give us a little context, kind of where you grew up and kind of how you got into this business, so to speak, and
Yeah.
where you are now.
Yeah, you bet. So I grew up in a resort town in northern Michigan called Charlevoix. So anyone who's ever spent time in Michigan or the Midwest probably is familiar with northern Michigan, about an hour south of Mackinac Bridge. Really, really beautiful area. Moved to Lansing when I was 18, and I started managing apartment complexes right out of high school. I did not know what I wanted to study, and had the benefit of meeting a gentleman that was an owner of over a dozen apartment complexes. So I started working for him when I was basically 18, 19 years old. I did that for a few years, moved to Colorado when I was 20, and kept managing apartment complexes. And then I got into brokerage when I was 22. And I worked for a gentleman that represented large national retailers. So he did like Walmart, Wendy's, if you remember Blockbuster at the time,
Yeah.
a number of people like that, coffee franchises, automotive groups. So I did retail brokerage for a couple years. And then a few years into my brokerage career, I started working more on like office and industrial deals. And I really liked working with individual business owners. Like I liked the large companies, they were fine, but it just felt more meaningful to me. And I enjoyed it more working with like an individual business owner that really was all in on his or her business, and that location was going to make or break their company. And so I just started doing more office industrial, and over a period of time, one of my industrial landlords that I was doing work for bought a medical building and asked me to start leasing it. And so I jumped in the medical space and started working there. And the culmination of how we got to our current company today is I was working for a large medical landlord, years into my brokerage career. And we had a dentist, and we had a dental deal, a plastic surgery deal, and then we had like an ENT deal come up. And within a short period of time, in all three of these doctors were going up against like large institutional landlords that had no clue what they were doing. And the landlords absolutely crushed these doctors in their lease negotiations. Like the doctors didn't have time to go to market. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have any representation. And so I was a landlord broker working for these sophisticated landlords, doing these lease renewal negotiations for these doctors. And like we had one doctor overpaid by like well over $400,000 more than he should have paid if he had an agent, if he would have negotiated properly. And so I had a couple deals that happened in a row where I watched these doctors just again get annihilated. Like they had no clue it even happened. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know they were overpaying. They didn't know it was, I mean, they didn't have any idea what they were missing out on. And I just remember like stopping for a moment and saying, man, this is not a fair fight. Like these guys do
Mhm.
not know what they're doing. They're being taken advantage of. It's a fair fight from the sense that like they voluntarily signed a lease. Like nobody made them sign a lease. Like they could have
Sure.
market.
Yeah.
But I had a couple deals that just it happened sequentially for me where I realized these guys need help. Like they're not equipped to do these deals. And so I started doing more healthcare tenant and buyer rep, and I loved it. I loved helping the doctors. I loved making an impact in it, in their life and in their practice. And after a short period of time of doing that, I decided to launch our current company, which is my last name. It's called Carr. And within a short period of time, we were working for hundreds of healthcare providers up and down the Front Range of Colorado. And then a few years into that process, we decided to start going to other states. And so we're 16 and a half years into this process now. We've represented literally tens of thousands of doctors and healthcare practices, and we save them a significant amount of money, significant amount of time. We protect their interests. We advise them. We make sure they don't get caught, unrepresented or unequipped to do these deals. And that's really the exclusive model: is healthcare only, tenant buyer only. And you used the tagline earlier. We want to help them maximize their practices profitability through real estate. So that's how we got here.
Well, it's very interesting, and being a physical therapist myself, and being the CEO of a large rehab company in the Pacific Northwest, obviously there's a lot of leases to consider and to deal with, and yeah, I mean, most healthcare providers are professionals first, and healthcare professionals first, and business people second. So, to have skill and understanding of a real estate market when you only do it every 3 to 5 to 10 years, you can imagine that it would hard to be good at it. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting niche. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
yeah, and even the guys that do it, themselves, let's say every 3 or 5 years, like the market's changed so much. I mean, markets shift quite a bit. I mean, look at the stock market today compared to 3 or 4 years ago, or the real estate market shifts dramatically too. But even if you think you have a grip on the market, the property shift. Like you could have a property that all of a sudden has a vacancy or two coming up, and if you don't know that that vacancy is coming up, you'll miss the fact that the landlord is more vulnerable on an upcoming lease renewal. And so you might see a building and say, oh, it's 100% lease. Well, what if they have a large vacancy coming up, or what if there's a property across the street that's willing to get really aggressive, to win your business? I mean, there's a lot of market factors that happen on a property by property basis that if you're not in tune with them, you're not going to capitalize. And so, getting a lease signed, anybody can sign a lease. Anybody can drive around, call on properties. Anybody can say, send me a proposal or agree to terms and eventually execute a lease. But the question is, did you lose a hundred or 200 or $300,000 over 5 to 10 years? And if the answer is, probably or yes, the good news is there's something you can do about it next time.
yeah. And we all know that those of us who run business or own businesses, that lease expense is usually the second highest expense we have after payroll. So it's not something to take lightly for sure.
That's right. And a lot of times people they just kind of relegate real estate to like, a necessary evil, or it is what it is. And they don't realize how negotiable it is. Like when it comes to payroll, as you mentioned, like, payroll is not very negotiable. Like, I mean, it's really not. I mean, you try to cut people's pay, they're gonna go work somewhere else. Like,
Yeah.
in today's day and age with inflation and everything else, like, pay goes up every year, costs of employees goes up every year, cost of providers goes up. It does if it goes down, you're going to be in a challenging situation where you're constantly turning over staff. But when it comes to real estate, most leases outpace inflation. Most leases outpace the market. You have these annual increases built in. So you signed a lease 10 years ago, it's had 9 annual increases. Most likely there's some significant renegotiating you can do to cut costs there. And again, like if you don't capitalize on that, you'll still probably be in business. That's not going to put you out of business, but you'll have to work a lot harder to have the same amount of money left over than if you did it right the first time.
And another the thing that I see, a lot of times, again, because it's not front of mind, and you're treating patients and trying to run a small business and whatever. It's often, the owner will come up and say, "Oh my gosh, our lease is due next month," to renegotiate, and that doesn't leave you much leverage either. So, I would assume that you help them with a schedule of trying to figure out when is the best time to start those negotiations, and try and create at least some leverage on your end.
Absolutely. Yeah, the concept as far as like, hey, we've got two weeks left before the lease renews or 1 month left on it. That the best equivalent we can give you on that one is like in a football game when the team that's up is trying to run the clock out. Like
Yeah.
landlords love to run the clock out. They love to wait until it's like a few weeks before the lease is up because they want to catch you off guard. They know at that point you don't have time to move if you wanted to without going into holdover. They know that you're going to probably panic. They know that you're going to feel overwhelmed. They know that you're not paying attention. You're kind of asleep at the wheel because if you would have been paying attention, you would have already done something. So landlords like to put pressure on tenants in ways that forces them to do what they want them to do. And in a scenario of not, paying attention to the key dates and deadlines, you probably missed a renewal option. Some leases have automatic renewals built in to where you automatically renewed by forfeit because you forgot to like, strike that, or you forgot to mention that you are relocating or that you don't want to exercise that option. So there's a lot of things that can happen when you miss those deadlines, but the number one thing is you end up paying way more than you should, and then you miss out on key concessions like free rent, renovation allowances to renovate or refreshing your space, resetting base years, paying unnecessary operating expenses that you could have gotten out of if you would have done it properly. So yeah, there's a lot on the line, believe it or not.
So, what would be a time frame for small health practitioner, business owner that, okay, when should I start the negotiations for the next contract with the landlord, or look to move? How far out usually would you recommend?
Yeah, you typically want to start the process right around 12 months out because that's going to give you maximum opportunity to capitalize. It doesn't take 12 months to build out a space or to move, but it does take time to go to market, look at your top options, negotiate with multiple other landlords or sellers. And then if you do have to do a build out, I mean, and it has to go through like a building department or a permitting process, it can take 2, 3 months just to get a permit in a lot of cities today because of how backed up they are. And so even if you want to move a couple walls, there's times you can just plug and play and move into a space, new carpet, new paint, new lights, new window treatments. That's it. That's great. But if you've got to move walls, do electrical, plumbing, stuff like that, that's typically like a 2, 3 month process just to get a permit, let alone to actually build it out. So if you start around 12 months, you give yourself maximum flexibility. If you start much sooner than 12 months, most landlords won't take you serious because they're like, hey, you're locked into a lease for another 2 years. Like, why would I talk to you right now? Like, you've got to pay me for 2 years. I don't want to deal with this one. But if you wait until there's only 2 months left or a short period of time, they're going to assume that you don't have the ability to move or you don't have the time, energy, or money to move. So the 12-month mark is really the sweet spot. And that allows you to go to market, negotiate, lease or purchase. If you need to build out, go through the design, the construction documents, the permitting process, then actually swing the hammers and get stuff built and erected and finished off, and then you can move in the right time frame.
So, if I hire you or somebody in your firm, are you negotiating with my landlord, or are you more advising me on how I should negotiate?
No, we are doing all the negotiations for you.
Okay.
You are in a significant position of weakness if you're doing it directly because the landlord knows you're not a real estate expert. It doesn't matter how many locations you have, it doesn't matter how often you're doing deals. They know that 40, 50 hours a week is going to helping people be well or practicing medicine or whatever you do, and they know that you're not equipped. So the idea of like, I don't care how savvy the healthcare provider is or the practice administrator, they know that you're not a real estate expert. They know that you don't know the market the way they do or another expert does. And so, it's kind of like this, like, you know, attorneys don't talk to non-represented people the same way they talk to attorneys. Like the IRS talks to an individual different than they talk to a tax professional or a tax attorney. Like if you're in a situation where there's a high dollar negotiation happening, if you don't level up with commensurate experience or expertise, you're not going to get the same response or the same results. So the person who's representing you is not making any decisions for you. Like they're not doing it without your approval or without your knowledge. They tell you their game plan. They go to market. They get multiple property options for you teed up. They negotiate with multiple landlords or sellers simultaneously, and then they're leveraging one against the other. And then when they finally get to your current landlord, the kind of lease renewal scenario, they're not wondering what a good deal is. They're not wondering what you could get if you went across the street or if you bought your own property. They've already got that information in their hand. So when your landlord says, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, they know instantly if that's good, bad, or great. Like they know right
Hmm.
away, like, hey, this is a fair offer. Let's just try to get a little more TI or free rent. Or if they're like, this is a ridiculous offer, like you're 30% above market. They've got vacant space in the building, 20% below what they're asking you to pay, or whatever it might be. Like they had that information, but without that information, you can't negotiate. Like there's no MSRP on your building. Like there's no like manufactured suggested retail price. Like everyone who buys, you know, this piece of equipment pays this, or if you want this F-150 with these features, every Ford dealership charges X roughly. Like there's nothing like that. It's really negotiable, and it depends on their motivation, depends on competing properties in a market. If you go to market and there's nothing available even close to what you have, and the landlord knows that, they're going to take you for a premium. If they have four other properties that are competing with them, they're going to have to get aggressive if they think you know the market to get there.
Who is your typical client? Is it, very small business where they might only engage you every 3 to 5 years, or are they healthcare companies or providers that have multiple sites that maybe you're working on multiple leases, throughout the year?
Yeah, it's really both. I mean, as we're recording this right now, we have over 5,000 healthcare practices that we're doing work for coast to coast. And so, a significant number of those, I'd say probably two-thirds of those are like individual providers that have like maybe one or two or three locations. And then a third of our clients are like larger, more sophisticated groups. And they could be people that have 10 locations that are trying to scale and go beyond there. We have clients that have hundreds of locations, and we have clients that have literally thousands of locations. So it's everything, from this is my very first practice, my very first office. I'm starting up for the first time to I've been practicing for 40 years with my one practice, help me, to the guy that has three or four locations, the person that has 10, and to the person who has, or the group that has hundreds. So anyone who is a healthcare practice or group that wants to capitalize and wants to save as much on their real estate as they can and capture as many concessions as they possibly can.
So you're based in Denver, or near Denver, and I think in the bio we said you had 150 employees that work for you. Um, so are all those people based in Denver, or do you have offices around the country?
No, yeah. So we've got, just to use some of the terminology, we've got about 20 employees that are on our corporate staff that do things from like we have in-house legal counsel, we have mapping and demographic services, we have marketing, we have all sorts of people that do different things corporately. And then I think as we're recording this one, I think we have like about 150, 160 agents that are across the country. We're licensed in all 50 states. So, whether you're in, from Alaska to Maine to Florida to Southern California, like I mean, every state we've got people that are either there or can help you. Some markets we've got multiple agents. Some markets they would come from like a city nearby. Depends on where you're located because we have clients that are in major metros. We have clients that are in more rural areas. So, but we've got somebody who could help anyone who comes, through the door or that calls in or emails in. And having that local market expertise is a game changer because every
Yeah.
market's different. Like it's very different if you're in
Yeah.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, than if you're in downtown Manhattan, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. And the real estate deals are differently. The way they're structured is different. The landlords are very different. So
And do they work exclusively for you? Are they employees of your company, or are you just kind of like subletting a broker from the local area?
no, they work exclusively for Carr, our
Okay.
company, from the real estate perspective. Yeah, all they do is healthcare real estate. I mean, that's what they're specialized in. They're not selling houses on the weekends. they're not doing like an industrial deal or coffee franchises, and then they help do a healthcare deal. They're trained from day one. Every one of our agents is trained at our corporate office. It's a extensive training that lasts literally a couple years. I mean, it's more intensive the first 3 or 4 months, but everyone that comes in goes through the same training, the same continuing education. We have national meetings, we have regional meetings, we have all sorts of things that we do to make sure that our people are all on the same page. And so if you're working with an agent, again, like in Miami, Florida, or in Chattanooga, Tennessee, you're going to get the same expertise, skill set, processes. We use the same spreadsheets, forms, comparisons, analysis tools. Everyone's playing out the same sheet of music.
So, you always hear about, like Manhattan. I mean, that's a whole different beast. That's, nobody can do Manhattan unless are from Manhattan, so to speak. So what you're saying is you have people from Manhattan that are working that market.
We do, yeah. We have people like if you have a deal in Manhattan, you're going to get somebody who lives, breathes, works in Manhattan. If you're in Queens, you need someone who lives, works, and breathes in Queens. And again, if you're in Chattanooga, you're going to get somebody who knows the market, who lives there, who understands the players. And again, it goes beyond just like the deal. I mean, you get into like the entire team. I mean, if you're going to do a brand new office in Chattanooga, like you're going to need a good local architect, a good local contractor. You're going to need equipment suppliers. You're going to need a good, attorney who understands Tennessee real estate law because you're going to get a Tennessee lease. If you need financing, you want someone who understands healthcare and who specializes in healthcare. So our guys are really good at not only doing the real estate, but also helping to assemble whatever team you need. If it's a lease renewal and all we're going to do is just freshen up the space, new flooring, new paint, maybe we change out ceiling tiles, maybe we upgrade to LED lights, maybe we upgrade to like solar, like roll down mesh shades versus like slat blinds, stuff like that. That stuff's pretty easy. You can just usually find a good, local art interior designer to do that. But if you're doing a full build out or a full project, you need a team of like 6, 7 people, and knowing who the top people are in a market is really helpful as well.
So your company is going to find that contractor for me, and do they even manage that contractor as well, and make sure that they're on time and doing what they're supposed to and whatever? Is that all part of the deal?
We don't go to that extent as far as like construction management. That is a very valid service you could hire if you want to. We will give you options. So we're never going to choose the person for you. It's just like real estate. We're never going to choose the property for you. We're going to show you the top 6 to 8 properties that meet your criteria. We're going to negotiate the top 3 or 4 properties. Ultimately, you choose which one makes the most sense. Same thing on the vendor front. If you said, "Hey, Colin, I need to get financing," we would look at your type of transaction. We'd figure out 3 or 4 banks that we think are the best fit for you, and we'd make introductions. And then we can help advise you as you are proceeding, but we wouldn't select them for you. You're going to fill out your own information, applications, all of that. Same thing on the architectural contractor front. Like we're going to introduce you to the top 2 or 3 or 4 people that we think are the best fit for your requirement. We'll give you our feedback on what we are hearing, and then you're going to probably competitively bid out 2 or 3 contractors, and then ultimately you're going to make the decision as far as which one you want to go with. It's not always on price too. A lot of times it's like, hey, the price is not the cheapest, but it's the guy that I think is going to do the best job for me, or he or she interacted with me in the most favorable manner. I trust this person more. We're going to give you options and make sure that you're not being forced to work with anyone. You have the choice of, hey, I'm going to choose this group because I like them, I trust them, their pricing was good or fair. But ultimately, we're going to help you assemble the best team possible.
We talked earlier about that, one of the mistakes that health care professionals make when they're doing this is they wait too long, or it's not front of mind and they kind of forget about it till it's too late. What are other common mistakes that you see that these professionals have made that have cost them way more money than it should?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll give you like the top. I'll give you like the top 3 or 4. The number one mistake that healthcare providers make with their real estate is they try to do it themselves. And I mentioned this earlier. Anybody can drive around and call on a sign or search online for properties. Anybody can say, "Send me a proposal." Anybody can say, "Well, would you take a lower price?" And anybody can say, "I'm ready to sign a lease," and then docu sign a lease. But that doesn't mean you did it right. It's like this, like I can have my son, like stand on my back and crack it, but that's probably not the best game plan. Like
Yeah.
I can grab a pair of pliers and just wiggle my daughter's tooth until it comes out so that she can get braces now, but it's probably not the right game plan. There's probably a better game plan to go to an oral surgeon. So like doing something like and getting it done, getting the job done versus doing it effectively is totally different. So do it yourself is the number one thing we see happen. People that are incredibly intelligent, they're academic, they're clinically savvy, they might even have phenomenal like bedside manner, like chairside manner. They're great at what they do, but they're not a real estate expert. So they lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in these deals and they think that they did a good job. We see this one every day. Like people will call us and say, hey, I just signed a 10-year lease. Like I know I'm already signed, but would you just look at my lease and tell me? And we'll look at it and be like, yeah, you lost $300,000. And at that point, you cannot undo what's been done. Like there's no mulligan on leases. Like you shank a shot into the woods, like on the golf course, like you just reach into your pocket, grab another ball on a tee, and like you hit it again. Does not happen that way in real estate. You sign a 10-year lease, 5-year lease, you are locked and loaded, and the landlord's not gonna voluntarily like refund $300,000 that you overpaid because you found out you did a bad job.
Hmm.
So do it yourself, by far the number one issue, unequivocally. The next thing that we see is that people will only negotiate on one property. And this is a terrible game plan because you have no basis or no benchmark to compare the deals. Um, if you are in a current space and you have a lease coming up for renewal, the only benchmark you have is what you're currently paying. Well, that's a really bad benchmark because you might be overpaying by 20% compared to what they would have done if they had a fear of loss of losing you, or if you knew how to negotiate or leverage other landlords, or if you could have moved across the street and gotten a better deal. So in residential real estate, people will pick one property, they like it, submit an offer, and if the seller says yes, you're under contract and you move forward. That's fine in residential. Commercial, it's a non-binding negotiation, and typically you're negotiating with 3 or 4 people simultaneously. Like Chipotle is not picking one landlord; they're picking 3 or 4 landlords negotiating simultaneously. Starbucks does the same thing. Like Lockheed Martin's not picking one office space or pick your large national office or retail user. They go to market, they find the top properties that meet their criteria, and then they're negotiating with 3 or 4 landlords. They want the best terms. They're not going to guess and wonder if one landlord gave them the best deal. They're going to figure out the market based upon factual negotiations. So picking one landlord, negotiating or having a lease renewal coming up, and then just asking the landlord for a proposal, like that's the next biggest mistake people make, whether they have a broker or not. It's a terrible game plan. And then I would say the third mistake people make is that they have the wrong timing. You indicated this earlier. They don't start the deal at the right time. They either start like 3 years in advance. The landlords have no motivation to negotiate, and they end up signing at least 3 years in advance, and they get a fraction of what they would have received if they would have done it right. Or they have the clock run out on them, and they end up losing 200 grand because the landlord says, "Look, you're not going anywhere. You have no clue what you're doing. Take this deal. I'm going to kick you out of my building." And then they forfeit their negotiation, sign a lease, and forget about it for 5 more years. And then I would say the fourth thing people do, last thing I'll mention, is they consult with other healthcare providers and ask them what they received, and they use that as a benchmark and what they're asking somebody their opinion on who did not do very well in their negotiation. So you have it all the time. You have a doctor who's in a building, there's another healthcare provider in the same building, could be totally different use, could be like a physical therapist and then next door to a veterinarian, but they'll say, hey, what'd you get? And what did you ask for? What are you paying? And then they'll tell them, and then they will benchmark their negotiation off of what someone else received. And 9 out of 10 times, the person who they're talking to did a terrible job. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
like, again, you're using what somebody else messed up on as your standard. And again, we see this one, like I can't tell how many times people tell us, well, I talked to my buddy who is also a physical therapist. He's down the street, or my good friend I went to college with is in Iowa, and she said she got this. And we're like, again, that's just a really bad game plan.
And if you think about it too, it's pretty obvious, but I think it's probably worth saying that let's say that I'm, near retirement or I want to sell my practice. Whatever you're paying on your lease or whatever you paid for the building if you own it, that's definitely going to affect the value that you're going to get in the purchase of your company. Because on one side, if you're paying too high, it's going to reduce your EBITDA that you have in your business. But then, as a buyer, I'm going to come in and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to pay that kind of lease. That's crazy." So I'm sure it affects the sale of your company if that's what you have in mind.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, it affects your current cash flow, like as long as you own it. And then, it's going to affect the multiplier as far as what someone pays you. If you're overpaying by, let's just say, even like $20,000 per year on your EBITDA, and then you're going to get a multiplier of EBITDA when you sell your practice. I mean, that $20,000 of overpayment or excess rent could be worth 50 or $100,000 in value when you sell your practice because it wasn't done right. On top of that, it also it sets the wrong precedent for your practice on a current basis. People will say, well, as long as your rent's between 6 or 8% of your production, you're good or whatever. It's like that's not accurate. Like that is a random range that somebody came up with and said, yeah, as long as you're 6 to 8%, you're good. What if I'm at 8%, but I could have been at 3%? Like again, like, the reason that makes no sense as well is because, well, what if one guy's practice does 400,000 a year and one guy's practice does 2 million per year? Like six, and they're both in 3,000 square feet. Like 6 to 8%, that's not apples to apples at that point. So people will benchmark and say, as long as your marketing is not more than this, or you shouldn't pay more than this for SEO, or your reimbursement rate should be this. Again, there's certain things that, yeah, those are good estimates, but the whole idea of like your rent should be 6 to 8% of your production really is just it's illogical because again, are we talking about a $400,000 per year practice or an $800,000 per year practice or a $2 million per year practice? Because is my lease rate $16 a foot or is my lease rate $36 per square foot? The 6 to 8% range doesn't take into consideration any of those other factors, and so it's really it's like I give you other analogies, but I think it's pretty clear that that's not
Yeah.
the best game plan.
So let's get everybody's attention here. Take your typical healthcare office, 3 to 4 thousand square feet. And you come in and work on this deal compared to if they tried to do it themselves. How much money are we talking about? I know this is going to be a real generalization, but how much money do you think we're talking about that somebody, if done right and hired a professional to do it, could put that much money in their pocket annually?
Yeah, so let's say it's 3,000 square feet. That'd be an average size space for a lot of different uses. And let's say you're overpaying by, let's say, even like $3 a square foot. $3 a square foot times 3,000 square feet is $9,000 per year. Over a 10-year period, that's $90,000 that you overpaid in rent. And again, if you bill a dollar, you don't keep a dollar. So in order to pay the $90,000 of excess rent you shouldn't have paid, you might have to put up 300, $400,000 of production to have the 25% left over to pay that bill, so to speak. So you do a $90,000 excess rent payment over 10 years, and you got to put up an extra 300, $400,000 of production to pay for that mistake. Let's say that you don't capture all the free rent that you should have captured. Let's say you get a month or two free and you should have gotten 4 or 5 months free. And so you miss out on 3 or 4 months of free rent. All of a sudden there's 30, 40, $50,000 of free rent that you should have started your new lease term with, either a startup, a new lease, a relocation, or a lease renewal. You lost 30, 40, $50,000 that you shouldn't have paid that would have gone right back into your pocket personally, and it would have bumped your income for that year by that amount of money, or you could have reinvested in your practice. If you have to renovate your space and you either don't get the money that you need, so number one, your space looks dated or it doesn't have the right feel or it doesn't have the level of excellence that you strive to provide for care. And so you've got carpet that should have been replaced or flooring or paint or ceiling tiles or lights or your check in and check out is not the way it should be. It's just some random desk in the middle of the room versus it should have been a built-in. You could have got a built-in and made it look a lot more professional versus just some random desk you got at Office Max or some store. Your space doesn't have the same feel as it should have. So you don't get the right TI allowance. You either borrow money and pay 7 or 8% interest over 5, 7 or 10 years, or you take cash out of your practice, or you just don't do it. And so, the average renovation allowance, we capture allowances 50, 80, 100, $200,000 all the time, depending on what's needed for the space. If it was 3,000 square feet, I mean, it's hard to imagine not getting at least, let's say, 50 to $60,000 just to renovate a space if you're already there. If you need more than that, I mean, it's not uncommon to get a lot more than that if your space needs it. One of the questions is, what's going to happen if you move out? What's the next guy going to get? And if it's a big number, if it's $100,000, $200,000, we're going to go for at least a big portion of that. And so, losing tens of thousands of dollars on a renovation allowance, absolutely. And then other concepts like, what are your annual increases? The landlord will tell you everyone's paying 3% or 3.5%. Well, that's probably not the case. They're probably just lying to you, and you were ignorant enough to believe it. What if we could have gotten it down to 2% or 2.5%? That extra 0.5% or 1% over 10 years, that's 9 increases. That could easily be tens of thousands of dollars as well, too, that you should have avoided paying, but you believe the landlord when they said everyone's paying 3% or everyone pays 3.5%. Now, maybe everyone's paying that, but probably not. And so you look at like lease rate differences, free rent differences, tenant improvement allowance or TI allowance differences, annual increases. Like those four alone are going to easily be, again, on the smallest deal, short term, that's going to be $100,000 easily, if not 200. And then you start getting into some of the larger spaces or like bigger swings in those categories of concessions. You can go way above that. And then there's a lot of other things you can get into. You can get into a number of other economic negotiations that deal with operating expenses or capital improvements, stuff like that. And then you get into stuff like, business terms, like what happens when you want to sell your practice. Are you going to get stuck as a personal guarantor on a practice that you sold that you don't own anymore? Like, are you going to end up being as a personal guarantor for a practice that you don't have a legal right to even step foot into the space without their permission? Yeah, there's a lot of other business
Mhm.
negotiation terms that, depending on the stage of your career, are really important to go after. They might not affect your monthly cash flow, but they will affect if you want to sell your practice or if you want to do certain things in the future.
You brought up free rent, and I've heard this a lot. People get really excited about free rent. Oh, I've got, 3 months free rent or 5 months free rent. But doesn't the landlord just put that on the other end of it? I mean, it's like, okay, this much, and then your monthly fee is just going to be, they're going to recoup that in once you start paying of what you pay. Or do you
Well,
think you can negotiate that?
there's two ways to do free rent. One is they give you free rent and then they just take, let's say it was like each month was like, let's say $6,000 of free rent. And then they basically just take that free rent and they put it into the future rent payments. That's
Right.
not free rent. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the
Yeah.
lease rate was going to be 6,000 no matter what. And then you don't pay rent for the first 4 or 5 months. Like that is true free rent. Like you're not paying money for those 4 or 5 months. Even if they tack on like future payments, like let's say it was a 5 year lease and you got 5 months free, and they made the first 5 months free, and then you had 5 full years of rent. So it was a 5 year, 5 month lease term. You still didn't pay any rent for 5 months. That's still 5 months where you're putting that $6,000 back into your own personal pocket or saving it. That is true free rent. So there's free rent where they basically just put it back into the deal and then they raise the cost of your rent every month. That's not free rent. That's abated rent. True
Okay.
free rent is when you don't pay anything for that month and the money is not put into future rent payments. That's very valuable.
So most medical practitioners are in buildings where there's other medical practitioners. So the chance of purchasing a building, or unless you're rural or something, are probably not usually not an option. But there's condo options and things like that. So when do you advise a medical practitioner to buy their space as opposed to just continue to leasing it for their career?
Yeah. So we are a big proponent of owning commercial real estate for your practice, if the numbers make sense. The only way to know that is to go to market and look at your options. You could be in an area where you have 4 or 5 options to purchase and none of them make sense, or all 4 or 5 make sense. You could also be in an area where you don't have one option to purchase even if you wanted to. Like there's some parts of metro areas where it's really dense and all the buildings, like you mentioned, are multi-story, multi-tenant buildings. And you might be in a place where if you wanted to buy your own building, it's going to cost you $8 million, and that's not going to be an option for most people. So the best way to figure it out is just go to market and look at, are there office condos? Are there smaller buildings that are for sale? Or is it maybe a three-tenant building and you can't afford it? It's going to be more than a single-tenant building, but it's got cash flow coming from two other tenants, and you're going to become a landlord, and it could become one of the best investments you've ever done in your entire life. So the best way to decide is just to go to market, look at what's available, hire an expert, let them advise you. And then ultimately, once you find a property or two that does meet your criteria, the economic consideration is going to be very straightforward. Number one, what is the upfront cost to get into each property? Like one of them is a security deposit to rent, and the other one is going to be a down payment of 10, 20%. Like, do you have the money to put into the property? One's going to be a $6,000 deposit, one's going to be a $100,000 down payment. Do you have the money to do that? The next thing is, what does the monthly cash flow look like? Meaning, like, your rent payment costs 6,000. What does it cost to own the real estate? It might cost 6,000 to own it. It might cost 12,000 to own it. Does that work for your practice on a monthly basis? The next thing you look at is, what are the tax deductions? When you own real estate, you get deductions like interest, operating expenses, etc. But you also get to depreciate the property. Well, there's bonus depreciation right now, and there has been for the last 4 or 5 years. So you might end up with buying $1 million property, and you might get a $700,000 tax deduction for buying it the very first year you bought it. And so, through cost segregation studies or bonus depreciation. So what do the tax deductions look like owning real estate? You might have a scenario where it costs you 6,000 to rent, it costs you 12,000 to own, but you get a $700,000 tax deduction, and that offsets a significant amount of your income for the next 4 or 5 years. Like, that might change the entire analysis. And then the last part is, what does it look like after principal paydown? One property you pay rent for 6,000, the other one you pay 12,000 as an example. But what if 3,000 per month were principal pay down? So really it's 9,000 versus 6,000 then, because the $3,000 is basically a forced savings account. That's still your money. Your equity is going up, your net worth goes up every month you pay your mortgage company. And so you could look at a scenario where one costs 6, one costs 12, but after principal pay down, after depreciation and tax deductions, and then after maybe things like appreciation, where the property should go up in value most years, it could be a net situation where it looks like one costs twice as much, but it might not actually cost any more. And then you get into scenarios where one costs 6,000 to lease, one costs, let's say, 8,000 to own, and the one that costs 8,000 to own, the effective cost is actually thousands of dollars less than the lease because of those other benefits. So, that cost analysis, purchase versus lease analysis, will really tell you what the numbers look like. But ultimately, you're going to know, I like the property. I could see myself there for 10, 15 years. I want to own at this stage of my career. Or you say, look, I don't want to deal with any of these things. It's easier for me to keep renting, and I'm going to sell my practice in 3 years and walk away, and I don't want to rock the boat.
So, with that level of sophistication and consideration and number analysis and all what you just went through, is that something that your agents do for me as a client, or we bringing in another finance professional to figure all that out and even find the potential properties?
Yeah, we're doing all of it. We're going to take your requirement. We're going to go to market and figure out which properties meet your criteria requirement to the highest standard. We're going to always try to find multiple properties to give you choices to choose from. And then once we start getting some of the economics, we're going to run those numbers directly. Now, if we get into a really sophisticated, like, purchase, we have no problem bringing in a good CPA to help you with the analysis, or to help us with it. Eventually, if you decide to purchase and you want to do a cost segregation study to maximize your tax savings, then yes, you'd hire an engineering firm for that. But the initial upfront analysis, we should be doing all of that for you.
So I hear a lot too, like people say, "Well, I'm not big enough to hire somebody of that level of sophistication, or I can't afford that person." So if I'm the leasee, how do I pay for that level of service?
That is one of the best parts of working with us. So commissions in commercial real estate are typically paid for by the landlord or the seller, just like they're typically paid for by the landlord or seller in residential real estate as well. So if you've ever bought a house as a residential buyer, you are probably familiar with the idea that the seller of the property hires a listing agent and then they have a commission amount that's set aside, and that commission is built for two people. If you're buying a house and you don't use a buyer's agent, that listing agent gets a double commission. And don't be fooled. Listing agents love to say, well, if you don't use a broker or an agent, I'll give you a better deal, as they are taking a double commission to the bank. Okay. It's the worst, it's the worst lie you will ever hear. If you don't use someone who will give you a better deal, no, that's not how it works. So in commercial real estate, if you are a lessee, you're a tenant or a buyer, if you go it alone and you go and just try to do your own negotiations, you do not save $1 because you're not the person paying the commissions. It's not a for sale by owner where you're the owner choosing not to pay commissions. You are entering into a transaction where the landlord or the seller has already determined in advance what they're going to do or not do. And they'll love to tell you we don't pay commissions or we're not paying commissions or we'll give you a better deal. They're lying right to your face. What they're saying is if you don't use someone, you're going to be less sophisticated. You're not going to know what I tell you is true or not true. You're not going to have as many options to leverage against me. I'm going to take you for a couple $100,000 more than I would be able to if you had an expert. And if you are dumb enough to believe that, then unfortunately you are dumb enough. And I don't say that rudely. It's one of those things where they've got money set aside for every deal. There's no way a landlord's telling Chipotle we don't pay commissions or telling Starbucks we don't work with brokers. They know that those tenants are too sophisticated. They would never tell those people those things, but they will tell an individual doctor or practice owner those things to see if they're ignorant enough to believe it. And unfortunately, doctors are a lot of times trusting people. They believe the best in people and they don't realize that they're getting taken advantage of. And if we change the terminology from, let me change the terminology from landlord. What if I told you it was a personal injury attorney? Would you believe them then? Okay,
Mhm.
like every billboard, everywhere you go is a personal injury attorney talking about how they're going to sue an insurance company and get millions. Like if that person told you, not to have an attorney like, in a personal injury lawsuit, like would you believe them? Like you no, like you'd go get an attorney real quickly. You don't want to do the same thing for a landlord. So
Mhm.
long story short, when you hire an agent or a broker to help you as a tenant, and they work with you to help you find the right spot to lease, they negotiate the terms, they advise you, they help you assemble the team, or they help you purchase real estate, they're going to get paid by the landlord or the seller. And 99% of the time or more, it's not going to cost you anything personally. It's coming out of the seller's proceeds. And if
Yeah.
the broker does try to charge you, like just don't work with that broker. Like some brokers do charge the tenants or buyers. We don't charge tenants or buyers. It's not our business model. We're going to get paid by the landlord or the seller. That's how we do it.
So let's switch gears here a little bit. So you have a company that you said, approximately 150 people or more, and they're spread out all across the country. And so from a CEO running a company and trying to build culture and trying to build leadership training and trying to make sure that they bring the message that you want, them to have. How do you do all that? What's your leadership training and what do you do to make sure that you're consistent with your message?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because, at the end of the day, like the culture and the vision of the company is going to determine everything that we do. So it starts from the very beginning. And when people come on board or they're even interviewing with our company, they are hearing a message that's very different than most real estate firms. We only work for healthcare providers. We only do the tenant and buyer side of a deal. We live and we die by every deal that we do. Like most real estate brokers put a sign in front of a building and it's one and done. They're never going to see you again. For us, we've got to do a phenomenal job on every deal we work with because our next referral is going to be the next deal that we do. Like if I take amazing care of you, you're going to tell your friends and colleagues. If I don't, you're going to also tell your friends and colleagues. So we are very, very intentional as far as always doing what's best for the client at the highest level, operating with a level of integrity that's a cut above the industry. We spend a significant amount of time training our agents so that they are the best and most prepared and equipped to help our clients at every stage of their career, every transaction. And we put our money where our mouth is. Like we live by every deal that we do. So We tell our clients, look, if at any time in the transaction, you're not 100% satisfied with our services, you can dismiss us with just giving us written notice and we'll go away. Like, we're not locking you into some contract that you can't get out of. We're not going to force you to do a deal. We're not going to tell you, we're not going to send you a bill if you terminate our services. Like, we literally only get paid if you're satisfied enough to do a deal. And you're happy. So we're super intentional with culture, with vision, but we invest in our agents at a level that's higher than any other real estate firm that I'm aware of.
So I understand the philosophy and the message, but how structurally do you do that? Do you get together in person? Do you do Zoom calls monthly or weekly, or just kind of give us a basic format of how you make sure that that message and philosophy is consistent throughout the company?
Yeah, that's great. So every one of our agents is tied to at least one, if not two, people in our corporate staff that are regional directors or oversee them as supervisors. So they've got very high level experienced people that have been with us for a very long time, that understand all the deals they're working on, that oversee them, that are always there for access to them and resources. But it starts in the very beginning. They do an in-person training in Colorado. We have literally a couple hundred hours of training videos and concepts that they have to watch to make sure that they're doing it the right way. We do weekly training calls with our agents for the first, year or two that they're here. We do monthly trainings for the whole company. We do town halls via Zoom. We do a national meeting once a year. We just finished ours. It was in Scottsdale. It's a 3-day meeting where everyone comes in and gets the highest level training and vision for the company. So the answer is it's extremely intentional. Weekly emails, weekly calls, monthly calls, weekly to then eventually like bi-monthly to eventually monthly, depending on their tenure, just kind of oversight, supervisory calls. We're very, very hands-on. Again, most real estate just they put your license underneath their firm and then like they don't know if you're honestly, they don't know what you do. Um, we are highly, highly involved in helping our agents succeed at the highest level, and our culture is exceptionally intentional.
So, Colin, in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything that I haven't asked you or addressed that you'd like to be sure and get in the program?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I mean, you've asked really good questions, truly. If I were to give some parting advice, it'll be a little repetitive, but I want to say it just kind of very straightforward. Look, hire the best people you can in every category of resource that you need. Like, you don't do your own taxes. Like, you hire a tax professional. Like, you don't review your own legal documents. You hire a great attorney. You don't build your own website, like you hire someone to do that. Like, it's really simple. It's the same thing for real estate. There's more on the line with real estate than there is in almost every other category. Yet for some reason, like, people think they can do real estate themselves. Like, you can, but it's not a good game plan. So the simple game plan is like you hire a good real estate agent. They'll protect your time. They'll save you hopefully a couple $100,000. They'll help you avoid really obvious pitfalls and complications and delays that you don't see, but that we see because we deal with it every day. And then at the end of the day, they're going to get paid a commission by the landlord or seller. And it's not just getting added to the deal to where you're going to pay for it either way. It's part of the proceeds. And if you don't use their services, the listing agent or landlord just pockets that money. So you're not saving money by not using someone. You're probably losing, honestly, a couple $100,000. So when it comes to real estate, it's a no-brainer. Like, consult with someone, hire someone to help you, and they'll make your life a lot easier and they'll make you much more profitable. So that's my advice for real estate, but it's really my advice for every area of business. There's great people out there that can make you a lot more money and save you a lot of time.
And if it's a little different than what you just said, at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Oh man, I love studying leadership and I love talking about it. Here's my top most simple tip that I would say is just get a little bit better every day. Like, do something in every category of your life that you can to get a little bit better. Do something for fitness every day. Do something for your professional development. Read 10 pages a day. Listen to 20 minutes of a podcast once a week. Um, you know, spend 15 minutes writing things down that you're hoping to accomplish or achieve, like your goals, your aspirations. Get intentional with things and just try to get a little bit better every day. To me, it's The best word picture I can give is how they used to make candles back in the day. They would take the wick, they would hold it literally in their hand, and they would just dip it in the hot oil or wax, and it would just get the slightest coat of wax on it. And they pull it up and they dry it. They put it back in there and they pull it up again. And every time they dipped that wick, a little bit more wax would get on that wick. And eventually, after they did it literally hundreds and hundreds of times, you'd eventually get a candle. And to me, it's the same thing for professional development. If you just get a little bit better every day in some area, every week you just get a little bit more information in a certain category. Eventually, like that consistency compounds and that persistency pays, and you find yourself in a dramatically better situation months or years down the road.
Well, that's well said. And, it's Colin, it looks like you've built a pretty impressive company here and you're doing good work. And obviously, as we've described through this whole session today, it's something that healthcare professionals should really grab onto. And I mean, it's money. I mean, if any healthcare professional tell you that, payment keeps going down and down and the pressures are harder and harder, but expenses keep going up and up. So if there's any way, that you can take that pressure off a little bit, and real estate is, as we said, is the second highest cost you have. Why wouldn't you try and explore that? So it's
Absolutely.
yeah. So thanks for your time today. I learned a lot, and I think everybody else will too. So I appreciate your time very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Okay, take care, and hopefully we'll run into each other down the road someday.
Sounds great. Appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.